For most of my life, I believed working hard was enough. I showed up, did what I was supposed to do, and assumed things would eventually work out. But it took me decades to understand why they never did. I'm sitting at my kitchen table, looking at a bank statement that would have terrified me 20 years ago. Not because the numbers are bad, but because they're good, stable. The kind of stable I spent 40 years chasing and never quite catching. I'm Ronald. I'm 82 years old. Last week, my neighbor asked me how I managed to retire comfortably after working in insurance for 37 years. She knows what those jobs pay. She knows it's not executive money. What she doesn't know is that I was essentially broke until I was 65. Not homeless broke, not desperate broke, but that grinding kind of broke where you're always one surprise away from real trouble. For most of my working life, I believed I was doing everything right. I showed up on time, worked overtime when asked, lived in a modest house, drove used cars. I wasn't wasteful or irresponsible, but every month felt like starting over. Every unexpected expense, whether it was car repairs or medical bills or something breaking in the house, threw everything off balance. I told myself this was normal. This was what middle-class life looked like. You work, you pay bills, you hope nothing goes wrong, and if something does go wrong, you figure it out. What I didn't understand then was the difference between managing money and money working for you. I was a money manager. Every dollar that came in already had a job before it arrived. At the insurance company, I processed claims all day, looking at other people's financial disasters, house fires, car accidents, medical emergencies. I saw how quickly everything could change for someone. But instead of motivating me to build something stronger, it made me more defensive. I focused on preventing disaster rather than building stability. I bought insurance for everything, put money into savings accounts that earned almost nothing, and convinced myself I was being responsible. The problem was that responsible wasn't working. After 20 years at the company, I was making decent money for our area, but decent money wasn't creating decent security. Margaret and I lived carefully. We didn't take expensive vacations, didn't eat out often, didn't buy things we couldn't afford. But we also didn't have breathing room. Every month required careful management just to break even. When Margaret got sick, that careful management fell apart. Even with insurance, there were costs we hadn't planned for. Medications that weren't fully covered, time I had to take off work, modifications we needed to make to the house. I watched our small savings disappear, not because we were careless, but because our system had no margin for real problems. Everything we had built was designed for normal months, and life rarely gives you normal months for long. After Margaret passed, I expected things to get easier financially. Fewer medical bills, lower household expenses, just one person to support. But easier never came. Instead, I found myself in a different kind of financial trap. I was earning the same income, but spending it on different things. Eating out more because I didn't want to cook for one. Hiring people to do things Margaret and I used to do together. Small expenses that added up to the same pressure. By the time I turned 60, I had been working for 35 years and had almost nothing to show for it beyond basic survival. No investments, no real savings, no clear path to retirement that didn't involve working until I couldn't anymore. The wake-up moment came during a meeting with a financial advisor. The company brought someone in to talk about retirement planning, and I decided to get a private consultation. She looked at my numbers and asked a question that stayed with me. What do you want your money to do for you? I had never thought about it that way. Money was something I managed, not something that worked. It came in, it went out, and my job was to make sure the going out didn't exceed the coming in. She explained something that should have been obvious, but somehow wasn't. Every dollar I spent on things that decreased in value was a dollar that couldn't increase in value. Every dollar that sat in low-interest savings was a dollar that wasn't growing fast enough to matter. But the real revelation came when she asked me to track every expense for a month, not to judge it, just to see where it actually went. What I discovered was that I was spending money on dozens of small things that I had never really decided to buy. Subscriptions I had forgotten about, convenience purchases that cost twice what they would have if I had planned ahead, repairs that could have been prevented with maintenance. None of it was dramatic. That's what made it invisible. I wasn't wasting money on expensive toys or luxury items. I was wasting it on inefficiency, on not paying attention, on solving the same problems over and over instead of solving them once. Around this time, I started spending more time in my garage, working with wood again. It wasn't intentional financial planning, but it changed how I thought about value. When you build something with your hands, you understand the difference between cheap and inexpensive, between tools that last and tools that break, between doing something right and doing it again. I started applying that thinking to money. Instead of buying cheap furniture that would need replacing, I built pieces that would last decades. Instead of paying someone to fix things I could learn to fix, I invested time in learning skills that would save money for years. This wasn't about becoming frugal or depriving myself. It was about becoming intentional. Every purchase became a decision rather than a reaction. The bigger change came when I met Eleanor. She had been teaching for 40 years and had built real financial security on a teacher's salary, something most people would say is impossible. Her secret wasn't earning more money. It was living below her means consistently and putting the difference into investments that grew over time. She had been doing this since her 20s, and by her 60s, the money was working harder than she was. Eleanor showed me something I had never seen before: automatic systems. Instead of deciding every month whether to save money, she had set up systems that moved money into investments before ye could spend it. At 62, I started my first real investment account. Not much, just $50 a month. It felt ridiculous at the time. $50 wasn't going to change anything. But Eleanor helped me understand that the amount mattered less than the habit.